Hi, this is a thoughtful conversation where we talk to interesting people, and it might be that what we talk about is really relatable, or it might be that we learn something new and kind of get educated on something that we don't relate to ourselves. But the idea is it leaves you thinking. So I'm here with Elliott Rae, and he has just, hang on, I've got it here. The book has just come out this week. That's right, isn't it?
Last week, yeah.
Last week,
Mm.
called Dad. So Elliot's the founder of Music, Football, Fatherhood, and then this is curated. So it's 20 different dads writing about a whole range of topics from postnatal depression, miscarriage, gay fatherhood, black fatherhood, immigrant dad. Like there's so many stories in there, but mostly stories that you don't hear enough of, I guess, is the main point. But would you introduce yourself, Elliot?
Hey everyone. So my name is Elliott Rae, and yeah, as you said, the founder of MFF, Music, Football, Fatherhood, and just someone that is super passionate about equality, who does a lot of work around men's mental health, who is big on community, and yeah, I'm just excited about kind of what the book is doing, our plans for MFF, and just yeah, really in an excited place right now. To be
Yeah.
honest, like probably the most excited I've been as an adult, which is crazy.
Ooh. That's big. That's big talk.
Big man.
I think, but I mean, because across the back of the book it says mental health, masculinity, and gender
Mhm.
equality. Those are some big topics, right?
Mm.
So, How did you get into this?
Yeah, so I think like for me, they're big topics, but they're all kind of one. Like they all interlink. When we're talking about masculinity, that is at the root of some of the inequalities around gender. When we talk about mental health and masculinity and fatherhood and mental health, they're all kind of one and the same, I think. But for me, it was I think from young, I've always had a passion just naturally for people and working with people. So after university, I set up a business called Make It Happen Music, where I went around to different like housing associations and colleges teaching young people music production. I did that for 3 years until the funding was cut by the coalition government. Not that I'm bitter, but that's what happened. But yeah, I was just super interested in that stuff. And for me, that was kind of like what I do now. It's facilitation. It was working around inequality. It was that kind of stuff, but just in a different guise, I guess. So it's always been in me. And then when I became a dad, obviously for people that read the story, there was quite a traumatic birth, and I was diagnosed with PTSD myself. And at the same time, in my professional career, I was working in diversity and inclusion. So I've been the head of Project Race in DEFRA, which is a big race equality project in that department. And then more recently, as head of diversity and inclusion delivery in the Treasury. So for professionally, I've always done that work as well. And then becoming a dad, going through my own journey, really seeing how the decisions that we made as a family kind of impacted my wife's career, my career, and more widely, I guess, equality as a whole. Super interested in race equality as well. So for me, I don't know where it came from. Maybe I was just kind of partly born with it, partly my own experiences, partly what I just find gives me purpose in life. I'm excited to wake up every day because I can do really cool, interesting stuff to do with my purpose. So I feel very blessed to be in this position, to be honest.
And I think like the difference between the authors in your book and the topics it discussed compared to, so say I started blogging before I started my business about 7 years ago, and the dad blogger scene is very different, I would say, to what you've got, the writers that you've got, the topics that you're on, and it would be more likely to be a kind of jokey dad. Or there was one, I remember one article that, whatever it was, but this guy had written that the only difference between me and my partner is that I can't lactate,
Mhm.
and just being like, it's not, that's not the point. That's not the common, like, equality doesn't mean you're the same, because
Yeah.
obviously men and women have completely different roles. I don't know if you've
Mhm.
got any thoughts on that.
Yeah, loads. To be honest, I mean,
I thought you
where
might.
do we where do we start?
Yeah, yeah.
So there's loads. I mean, you might have seen an advert a couple of years ago by a well-known margarine brand. Can't remember the name, but it was an advert where two dads go into a sushi bar, two new dads, and they've both got baby carriers and their babies in baby carriers, and one of the dads, as the revolving belt in the sushi bar is going round, one of the dads puts his baby on the conveyor belt, and then goes to get his sushi and then realizes, oh my gosh, my baby's gone. And basically,
Yeah.
Ofcom received so many complaints about that advert that they had to take it off. The
Right.
company had to remove the advert, because I think what the advert was doing was just kind of showing such an outdated,
Yeah.
and I don't even know, maybe outdated or just un it, you know, a not real,
Unhelpful.
unhelpful
Yeah.
stereotype of dads, to say that a dad in this day and age goes into a sushi bar and puts their baby on a sushi belt conveyor belt. Like, it just doesn't happen. But you see all the a lot of films, American films, UK films, a bumbling dad, not quite sure what to do. Oh my gosh, mum goes out and all hell breaks loose, and there's like poo up the walls and all. And it's
Yeah.
just like, the reality now is that is not the reality. You know, like, a lot of dads in our community and the ones that I know and the organizations I talk to,
Yeah.
the dads are fully involved parents. Like, most families now, both parents work just because of capitalism and what we have to do to survive. So by that very means, the dad does more childcare. And the ONS found in the first lockdown in 2000, sorry, last year, 2020, that dads were taking on 60% of the childcare that mums were doing. Obviously, that's not equal, but in terms of 2015, that figure was around 30%.
Mm.
So there is a trajectory where dads are doing more childcare, are being more involved. You know, I go on the school run. There's loads more dads there now than I'm assuming there was 10 years ago.
Mm.
The figures back that up. Um, Paternity leave, a lot of organizations are getting so good at paternity leave. I was just in a workshop talking about good practice around that. You know, Aviva have 6 months full pay paternity leave now.
Yeah.
Vodafone are doing great work. A lot of the big leading organizations are offering paternity packages because they realize that fatherhood has changed so much over the last 40 years. I remember when my daughter was going to be born, my grandma, just leaving my grandma's house, and she was like, Elliot, you're going to see something your granddad has never seen before. And I'm thinking, like, he's nearly 80. He's seen a lot of stuff. He's got 7 kids. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
what is there left to see?
Yeah. Yeah.
And she's like, Elliot, you're going to see childbirth. Because my granddad he was never in the delivery room. Like, in the 60s, men weren't in the delivery room. Whereas now, majority of the time, we're the birthing partner. So
Yeah.
I think just from that beginning, it's changed so much. And what we try to advocate for and change is that the narrative around in the media hasn't necessarily caught up with that.
Yeah.
Government policy hasn't caught up with that so much, and neither has workplace support and general, just as a society as well, friends and family
And
as
the
well.
narrative, by repeating an old narrative, it
Mm,
almost perpetuates it. So
mhm,
it's, and especially for those men who are, I guess this is where the kind of masculinity thing comes in. But if they're trying to fight against what would work for them better as a household, what would work for their partner better, which is to be more involved and to be okay with that,
mhm,
if they're mentally fighting against that, and then
mm,
all the things that they're seeing are kind of, or a lot of the things they're seeing are reiterating this idea that, yeah, you don't need to really know how this works, you can just change the odd nappy and that makes you a hero compared to 50 years ago.
mhm.
That's really complicated for everyone to get their heads around, I think.
Definitely. And Sam's chapter in the book, that's around shared parental leave and equal parenting. And he talks really well just about the responses he got when he told his friends and family and colleagues about what they were going to do. Some people were just perplexed when they made the decision to take shared parental leave. They couldn't understand it.
Mm.
It was a bit of an anomaly. So I think we do need to make sure this growing number of men who are looking to do things differently. We need to make sure that they have the support structures around them. So get me wrong, being a new parent can be very tough. Like, if you are if you do have your baby, a young baby, for a weekend, or you're taking shared parental leave, or you're just around them a lot more, like, it can be a very, very difficult experience. And mums have known that for years, and mums have support systems around them. It could always be better, but there are peer support groups. There's lots of online
Yeah, we've
platforms
thought
where
that
you
out
can
and
go.
it now exists. Yeah.
Yeah. And so for dads, we need that. If we're asking dads to do things differently and that's not happening naturally, we have to make sure those support systems are around. That's peer support groups. That's also government policy. That's also NHS screening around mental health. It's everything. It's no like one solution. It's a holistic change, I think, that needs to
I,
happen.
I think I haven't really thought of it like that, but but that's so spot on in that if you don't have that support around you, how are you supposed to crack on with it? Like, because it's so big, that having a child is so big, but having that shared responsibility, and I think like it's just so different to probably what most of us saw as well. So
Mm.
it feels like, although I suppose there's a big part of me that's going, come on, we need to catch up. Like, why isn't this happening yet? Why haven't we reached equality? But equally, when you look at this time frame of it, it's a really short amount of time that suddenly everyone's got to change. And I think from my own experience, and I know it's different for everyone, I think most of the men I know, or like partners of friends and that kind of thing, they don't quite know what their role is because they don't know whether to go with it or fight against it, or and that must be really confusing. And when you add in, like suicide rates of men over 40, you start to go, oh yeah, this is a really big problem, right?
Yeah, I think yeah, what you said there in terms of a lot of dads don't necessarily know what their role is now. And I think what the interesting thing is, back in the 70s, whatever, like the traditional model was the traditional model, whether people wanted to or not, right or wrong, that was just what people did. So you kind of knew what your role was going to be as the dad,
Yeah,
just go to work and the money basically. And that's what everyone did. Whereas now there's so many different ways of doing things. There's so many options in some workplaces and cultures. And what I always talk about, like, so through MFF, and we are actually launching something called the Lodge, which is peer support sessions for new dads. So that's going to start in July, and I think they're going to be really powerful. But when I go around, whether it's a community group or a workplace, I always say, like, look, never want to tell anyone what to do. This is not about saying this is the right way to do things. Shared parental leave and equal parenting or whatever is not right for everyone.
yeah,
That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is that there should be in society options for families to design things the way they want to design it.
yeah,
And so you can pick and choose what is best for you. I think within that, that's a very new concept. And within that, what happens is that it's now, okay, cool, it's a conversation now with your partner. So what are we going to do? Like, how are we going to design our life? You might be in a senior job, like you might be the higher earner, or actually I'm not enjoying my job, or actually I feel like there has to be a conversation within families to work
yeah.
out what they want to do. And I think that again, that's where we need to and there needs to be stuff in place to support those conversations. It
Because
might just be podcasts, resources, but places people can go.
because you have to strip out when you're. I mean, we've got three kids, so my eldest is 10 and my youngest is 3, and I think even in that time our own views have changed quite a lot of what we would think we want as a role. And I think I can remember my husband at one point saying, oh, I couldn't be at home or something like that. Like, one, that's insulting in so many ways, but also it's like, why couldn't you be at home? But I think a lot of it is to do with what he's been fed, the which is as provider. Like when we had our first baby, I know that his instinctive from years of and hearing all these messages was, I have to provide.
Hmm.
So he took to that with gusto, whereas I was, and I'm at home homemaking, and it didn't make either of us particularly happy. But also,
Mm,
it's really confusing to then you don't quite know what you want, and then that's when the resentment comes in. He's
mm.
resentful because I'm sitting there going, "Well, you get to go to work all day. I would love that." And vice versa. And I think that
Grass
is
is
so
greener.
yeah, and completely. But no one had really had that conversation with us prior to that point. So we had to muddle our way through, and it's really hard. I mean, it's really hard in
Mm,
a relationship. I think this and what you've sort of what you're getting at in the book, but just that whole conversation is probably causes most of marriage breakdowns, because you've got a lot of women who now are starting off life and going off to university, or starting a career thinking I'm equal, I can be equal, and
mm.
then you get there and neither of you know how to actually do it.
Yeah, exactly. And it can be a minefield, right? And I think what you said there around you were doing stuff, but you weren't necessarily happy.
Mm,
I think that's the key, like, because ultimately you might get some families where the man is just
yeah.
goes and gets a promotion, the woman stays at home. That's fine. If they're happy with that, that's cool. Like, I'm not here to tell you what to do. Like,
Yeah.
that's fine. And we shouldn't make those people feel bad. Like, I don't what we shouldn't do is make people who do
No,
the traditional route
or you do that
feel.
for a period of time, but
Mhm,
but acknowledging that that doesn't mean that forevermore. she is at home and he is working. Because
Yeah.
I think the other thing that then comes up is that you should have a really short maternity leave and you can get back to work. And I'm like, I didn't want to
Mm,
get back to work. I had a year
mm,
off with both my first children, and I wanted that. So
mm.
it's like exactly as you say. It's like there's choice.
There's choice, and yeah. So yeah, there's so much choice, and I think with the like, let's look at the gender pay gap, for example. When the first baby's born into a family, that's when the gender pay gap. That's when the actual massive um disparity comes into play. So there's a small one before, a very small one, but it gets very serious after that baby is born, and that's generally because traditionally the dad's thinking, "Oh my gosh, I got a baby, I better go and earn more money." So
Mm,
they go and fly and then they get promotion, and then the mum will either be a stay-at-home mum or go part-time, or maybe leave their job. And so what happens is over time that gap gets bigger, and it's very hard to then close that gap in a family, and for a variety of reasons. But one of the big reasons is that the behavioral insights team, they're a government arm's length body. They just did an experiment recently with CVs, and they had a whole set of CVs, and they sent, I think it's to 9,000 employees. One set of CV said, "Oh, career gap for like 4 years or whatever it was, stay at home mum," kind of thing. And the other CV had, I can't remember what it was, but it was something that kind of filled that gap with what looked like a job, and they had a 15% better return rate of
mm,
interview offers for that second CV. Because if you've been out of the work for a long time and you've been doing childcare, employers, they are humans who have biases, will look at that person as not kind of as ready to return to the workplace and not as
yeah.
competitive as someone else. So again, when that gender pay gap is there, it gets harder to close it because of those reasons.
Mm,
So yeah, I think it is about options, and it is about, what I hope the book will do is present some stories to people. There are specific stories there around work, and Sam's story is probably the one around shared parental leave and equal parenting. But even the other stories, what they do is I hope they will help men to identify with their role as a dad early on, because we know that a lot of dads won't identify as a dad really until their baby is born.
mm,
And what I think dad will hopefully do for expectant dads is, when they're expecting, when their partner's pregnant, they start to think about, okay, what kind of dad do I want to be? What kind of relationship do I want to have with my child? How do I want work to look? You know, little things. What kind of songs am I singing? Like, what kind of relationship do I want to have? And
mm,
we were so lucky. We did marriage prep, and then we did baby prep with our vicar at the time, and he kind of got us to think about those sort of things while we were expecting, which helped so much. It helped shape our kind of family vision. And I think what I hope dad will do for expectant dads is help them to think about them as a father before their baby comes into the world, and then that then makes those conversations around how you're going to live as a family a lot easier when it
that's
when it comes up.
so interesting because I think well, I did. First of all, I did marriage preparation, and my dad's a vicar, so my dad was.
Oh, cool.
No, not.
Maybe your dad did our marriage
It
prep
was
as
not
well.
cool. It was not cool.
You don't live in Finchley, do you?
No, it was. Oh God, it was all kinds of embarrassing. And my husband to be was really late, and it was just still. And my mum
But
had
with your dad, that must be awkward doing marriage prep with your
awkward,
dad.
really awkward. But no, but that idea of preparation, marriage, or having children, like what kind of dad do you want to be? Because if the response is I want to be at a pickup, I want to be at the drop off, like obviously that's thinking to the future, but the school run. I've got
Mm,
friends who have partners who have never done a school run because their job doesn't allow it. Full stop. Like there's no conversation. And when our eldest was going to school, my husband, he works in the city, and he went in, he didn't tell me he was doing it because he wasn't sure what the response was going to be, but he went and said, can I, 2 mornings a week, can I come in at whatever it was, 9, because he was going to breakfast club, rather than be there at his desk at 8, so that I can take my son to school? And they said yes. And it made such a difference to how I felt about him, about my working week, all that stuff. But also at the time, he had a team of quite young lads,
mm,
and I was thinking, and I said, he was like, they don't get it, and I was like, but they will see it, and then in 5 years time when they have babies or whatever it is, they'll remember, oh, that is acceptable. It doesn't mean that you care less about work or that you're, and it's such a basic thing, but I know a lot of female friends who are so frustrated because their partner won't even ask.
Hmm.
And it's like, but if you'd had that conversation earlier on, maybe you would have set that out to go, actually, this is how we would want it to be, you know, or I do want to be there at these things, or I don't know.
Mm.
But there's nothing to encourage you to have that conversation because it's all just fanciful. Oh, we're going to have such a great life
Yeah,
with the baby.
yeah, and I think that that thing around, you know, they don't ask, and like delving into the reasons as to why they don't ask, and you know, when we're talking about masculinity as a theme,
Yeah.
I think that is like the core of why they don't ask, because we know, like from the research, dads are twice more likely, or men, sorry, are twice more likely to have flexible working requests declined in the
Yeah.
workplace than women. So there are very there biases, they exist, and people's managers will have biases towards men asking for flexible working for childcare purposes, and that is a very real thing. Sometimes it's perceived, sometimes it's real,
Mm.
and from the perceived perspective, even if it's not real, some dads do feel like, if I go and ask, like your husband did, for a morning to take my kid to school, my managers and my organization are going to think I'm less committed to my job. It's a
Yeah.
very real thing. So they will then not ask in fear of not wanting to be seen as, like, not committed to their job.
Mm.
And sometimes when they do ask, it gets declined. It's more likely to get declined. So I think so what what I definitely don't want to do is like blame dads or say, why
No.
haven't you? It's more about through this book and through the work we do, is understand your challenges and understand that your dad probably didn't do it. There's probably not that many people in your organization doing it. The policies in your organization are rubbish. And you see all those things like that advert we spoke about and all the other societal things that are telling you not to do it. So I see how you can fall into that. And sometimes you have to then like see a role model like your husband is doing. He's going to be a role model to those younger people. The book will be stories of role models,
Mm.
and community where you can meet other people that are doing things, and then you feel empowered by that. Like a lot of time, interestingly, with men, and I've done a lot of work in terms of how men like take in information and how to engage with men, and a lot of it is not necessarily like a how-to guide or do this, or they don't want to hear, they don't want to be told what to do. It's more about
No.
who would have thought, right?
Yeah,
Don't
yeah.
be told what to
Go
do.
on.
It's more about, here is an example.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that? Like, oh, look at this. Like, it's that kind of thing. And that's why peer sessions and like case studies and storytelling is
Mm.
particularly powerful with men, because they want to feel like they're making their own decisions, but seeing stuff that they can relate to from a voice and a person they can relate to
Relate to
goes
that.
so
So
much
true.
further than
Yeah.
telling you what to do, basically.
Yeah. No, that's so
Mm.
true. And having a woman telling you that these things and that, oh, and so did it, it's just not that
That's
helpful.
not.
And unfortunately, but it's not. It
No, no,
doesn't
no, no.
translate like that.
Yeah.
But I think one of the other things you write in the introduction about the fact that we need to do this together, and I
Hmm.
think that's something that has been missing because it has been there's a male conversation going on and a female conversation going on, but in order for it to work, it's kind of, well, it has to be something that is a joint effort, really. That's something that happens together.
Yeah, 100%. I feel like with equality, whether it's race, disability, sexuality, it can't be just one of those groups. And when it normally is the more oppressed group
Yeah.
leading the charge. Like, so with race, it can't just be black and Asian and multi-ethnic people fighting for anti-racism. Like, the majority of the country is white. So we need white people to be on board with it. And it's the same with equality.
Mm.
It can't just be women and it can't be men. And I think what overall as well, and I didn't go too much into this because I think it might scare people off a little bit by the wording. But when we look at patriarchy, we can't deny that patriarchy, men benefit a lot from patriarchal systems.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone knows that. But I think what is not so much known as well is that a lot of men are oppressed by patriarchal systems as well. And it's addressing that and saying that actually the patriarchal system tells you to be a masculine man, which means do X, Y, or Z. be strong, don't show your emotions, don't complain,
Provide.
don't provide, be the breadwinner, be fast, be physically strong, like all the things that a man, right? Like these things are in our mind from a very young age.
Yeah.
You go in the playground and you'll see boys falling over, and the parents like, don't cry, get up, like So
Yeah.
it starts from childhood, and those things. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes they're fun and it's cool, but other times those things that you need to be are very damaging to you and very hard to achieve, and not everyone's going to achieve it all of the time. And so when you couple that with, a symptom of that is also not being able to talk and seek help and whatnot. Men don't speak, they have mental health problems, and that's why they are 3 out of 4 suicides are men. And that's not a coincidence. It's not that men suffer more challenges than women.
Mm.
It's that they're not able to seek help for those challenges. They don't talk about that. They don't seek help on the journey, and then they just think this is the only resort is to take my own life. So and that I think that suicide statistic is the most stark example of the patriarchal system and how it is, of course, oppressing women, of course, but also for a big portion of men, it's also negative for them as well. So when I'm saying like we need to do stuff together, is saying that this is not about when I'm saying like dad and the whole work that I do, it's not just for men's mental health. It's not just for men's well-being. It's around the gender pay gap. It's around mental health for women. It's around us as families
Yeah.
being better. And I think the world is so divided at the moment. It's very easy to look at things in a black and white perspective because that's
Mm.
an easier thing to do.
Yeah.
But I think when you get under the surface and you actually look at societal problems, we don't live by ourselves, and we need to start looking at things holistically. And so I didn't necessarily put that so much in the introduction. I think hopefully it came out as you said it did, but I
Yeah.
didn't want to kind of be so direct about it because I think that might still turn people off a little bit. And in my experience, when I talk this way, sometimes it does, to be honest, turn people
Yeah,
off.
because you're talking against the backdrop of historically, it's like, but what about the men? It's like when there
Yeah.
was like various movements like Me Too or whatever, and then they go, oh, but what about the, and it's
Mhm.
whoever, like you were talking about, whether it's the less oppressed group or the, and it's, and that makes it problematic. But I think that coming back to that idea of how, I suppose it's having some empathy for another group. So having empathy for men
Mhm.
enough to know. And I think, to be honest, I think most women that I know, we might rage against the man,
Mhm.
but when we then talk about it, we also we do understand that the roles are so complicated now, and because there are options, but you've still got this hammering of, well, this is how it should be. This is what I saw when I grew up. It
Mm.
makes it really hard to live in a certain way and be
Mm.
confident in that, I suppose.
Mm.
But I feel like it feels like it's changing. It's just, like you say, like, well, I mean, I live in London, but there's the groups that you see, and I think it does change around the country. But starting with where I am, yeah, you see a lot more men. Sometimes you always see the man at the school gate.
Mm.
So it's there's a shift. It just is
Yep.
taking time, right?
Yeah, there's a shift, and change is often slow. Like some things happen, like the pandemic, the little pandemic we just had. you know, things like that will accelerate change. And
Yeah,
in the workshop I was just doing was talking to employers about, that statistic about the ONS around men doing more childcare. Is we are at quite a pivotal time now, where with a lot of companies talking about hybrid working and transitioning to that, making sure that they also making sure families are catered for and the man can, if he wants to, have more flexibility than before, because
mm,
it could be very easy to just go back to normal, or we could capitalize on some of the good
yeah.
things that come out of the lockdown
And
as well.
the government, the work you're doing in government departments, does
Mhm.
that feel like you're getting in with the right people where you can sort of talk to the right people and affect change?
Yeah, so when I was in the government, I was an employee, so I
Yeah.
was a civil servant in Treasury. um, and yeah, you can make change. I mean, it all depends on
Who?
the perm sec, and it's individual based, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Like it is. When I was doing Project Race, for example, we had a great permanent secretary, I'll always big her up, called Claire Moriarty. And she was very brave. There wasn't many government departments at the time that were investing in just race equality work. And she kind of did that, and she employed three of us to just do that our work full time, and that was a revelation. And now it's more normal now. That was in 2017. So yeah, I think for for in-house D&I people, it can be a challenge because there's certain bureaucratic processes you have to go through. You can't always say just what you want to say all the time. Like there's relationships to manage. Now I'm finding the role I've got now, um, I can be a lot more honest, I think, and raw. And sometimes just hearing from a voice outside of the company
Mm.
helps so much. And then when you've got like, I found since the book has been launched and when the pre-orders went out, is people listen to me more now because they see me as more credible.
Proper,
I've
yeah.
written down, I've written some words down on a piece of
Even
paper,
if you're saying
basically.
the same as you were saying before, now it's official. Yeah,
How
yeah,
you got a book in Waterstones?
yeah, yeah.
You must know what you're
Exactly.
saying.
Yeah.
I'm taking it. I'm like,
Yeah,
cool.
yeah, ride it. I think like
Yeah.
that's the. I mean, yeah. I saw one of the reviews said like don't necessarily read this all in one go because
Mm,
it's such a lot to take in, and then lots of essays basically. So you kind of need to be able to process one before you move on to the next because there's so
mm.
many different topics. But what's the kind of what do you hope happens next? What's the plan?
Wow. So, on that point, I'm just so interested in terms of how, like, so, sorry, before I answer your question, how did you approach the book? Like, what did you read first? And
So I haven't finished it yet because
yeah, of course, yeah,
I'm not that far. No, I had to read another thing for something else. But
yeah.
I've read to be. I think I've read the ones. I've read miscarriage. I read about stillbirth. I was reading immigrant dad one. So I've kind of dotted around.
Mm,
But I think like it was I got to the immigrant dad one and I was like, I don't think I would never have read anything that was from the perspective of an immigrant
mm,
dad like that. Just that
mm,
it was kind of. I think I was drawn. I suppose initially the miscarriage and stillborn because I've heard and read so much about those from a female perspective. I was interested to read it from a male perspective,
yeah,
but because they're meaty, right? They're quite. It's quite small print.
yeah, yeah,
So they're big. They're pretty big chapters, but
yeah.
I
Well,
just
I'm hoping it's value for money, so people will get it and think, actually, do you know what? This is gonna last me a while.
yeah,
But
yeah, yeah. It's not,
yeah,
yeah, because sometimes you can buy something and you've read it in a day.
exactly. I'm like, what? Like,
No,
so that,
it must have taken a lot of work, but I think just hearing, they're just voices that you aren't out there
mm. Yeah,
unless
and
you
in terms
put
of
them
what
out.
happens next, I think so I well, the interesting thing is, I think when people read the book, like yourself, they're gonna gravitate to whatever story they've heard about, what they've experienced themselves, maybe a picture of the dad, that dad looks like me, I'll read his story, whatever. They'll gravitate to those. And then hopefully, like you were saying, they might see, oh, it's a pretty cool book. Do you know what? I might read one of those other stories that I probably wouldn't have read before.
Mm,
And that will open them up to a whole different world that they hadn't considered. So for me in putting this book together, like Kalai's story, it feels like my story. It's Phil's story about being an immigrant dad. I'm not an immigrant dad, but my parents were, and there's a lot that I can resonate with there. So like certain things you think, okay, I get this, and then maybe go to Michael's story, gay fatherhood and surrogacy. I knew nothing about that, so I've learned a whole load about that world now. And so what I hope the book will do on a kind of an initial level is just open people up to different experiences and worlds, and within that question their assumptions
yeah,
just about people in general, because we all do it, right? Our brains
yeah,
are or will naturally make assumptions. It's the way we survive a lot of the time. And so you walk down the road and you'll see a dad or you'll see a man or woman or whatever it is, and you make assumptions about that person. And I think what this book does is helps to break down those assumptions that we make, because when we get to know people, we learn more about what they're going through and their experiences, and find out actually there's more similarities than differences most of the time. So I think that is a really kind of potential powerful like byproduct of the book.
yeah.
Also interestingly is that I hope this book will last on for years, because someone said to me the other day, they were like, oh, I right now I may have had a miscarriage and I may be in a mixed race relationship and have a dual heritage child, but actually in the future I might be co-parenting or I might be an immigrant dad, or
Yeah.
I might have another one, do shared parental leave, like so. So what resonates with people now could change in 3 or 4 years when their situation changes. So I think that's super interesting too. But ultimately, the call to action in the book is is for more open conversations, really, is for the book to be used as not just like a PR exercise. I read the book, great, but something that people can use to have a conversation with their partner, with their son, their brother, their dad, their colleague, their manager. Have that conversation and understand people more. Think about how you can reimagine a better future in whatever that is, and see where that conversation goes. Because I think I guarantee once you read the book, share something you've read about the book, or share the book with someone else, you're going to build a deeper connection in that process. The
Mm.
funny thing is, I wrote about PTSD. I did not tell my parents about my whole experience
Right.
until the books were delivered in my living room. My parents came over, they saw 500 books. They were like, so the book's here. My dad picked it up and started reading it. And I was like, Dad, before you read that, you
That,
might want to know. And then like they came over to look after my daughter because I was doing a 5 Live radio interview talking about it. And I was like, I've never spoken to my parents about this before
mm,
because I just didn't want to, basically. But I can't not now because they're about to read it, and out of respect, I better tell you first, right? So,
yeah.
but again, that's just a real life example
Yeah.
of the deeper relationships that it's going to have. And I think overall as well, those 4 themes, mental health, I think is a massive one. Like there's statistics around 39% of new dads now will have concerns about their mental health. 1 in 10 new dads will have symptoms of postnatal depression.
Mm.
Men in general, 12.5% of men in the UK at the moment will have common mental health problems. So I think this book will open up stuff around that. I hope it does stuff around gender equality and helps people to get underneath the skin a little bit more about why we have those inequalities and how maybe there can be a different way of addressing some of those. The existing ways are good still, but this is maybe a newer approach for some people. And I think masculinity around men seeing themselves in the stories, feeling like they're not alone, knowing that okay, maybe I can talk up about things that I found difficult because this person has as well. So yeah, I think there's loads of impacts it can have, and yeah, I'm just really excited to see what it does.
Yeah, well done. It's really it's just really good to read a different perspective, I think. And if we're going to, as a collective, kind of look at how these things change, then you do need to have heard the other stories. So
Mm.
well done. I'm excited for you.
Yeah, and thank you for stocking the book.
Yeah, no, play.
Your business
Yeah.
is amazing, man. Like I checked it out and I was like, this is cool. My friend Arion sent it to me. He's in the book as well.
Okay.
So he sent it to me on WhatsApp, and then straight away I was like, oh, a message, and I thought, you just you don't know who's behind it.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
was like, I didn't know who was, but I thought it was a big corporate machine or whatnot. I thought they just sent me an email,
It's not just
and then
that team, but
yeah,
but anything like that, any potential new products will generally go via me. But
mm,
no, because as soon as I saw it, I was like, okay, this isn't something that we've seen.
mm,
Like, and like I say, there's the dad blogger, much more traditional stuff.
mm,
But I don't think people are in. Oh, and especially a lot of our audience are women.
mm,
Our male audience and our corporate audience is really growing, but actually to potentially have it in front of women is
mm,
great because I think that's where you need that to, as we say, to keep that conversation going.
100%. So yeah, and I thank you for the support, and yeah, just thank you so much for embracing it and helping to amplify the voices. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.